everybody. I am Allie C.
And I'm Footless Joe.
And today we are happy to bring to you our first episode of our 4-piece installment called Adapting Together, an Honors Conversation. Joe, I am so excited to finally be sitting down. It has been a long time coming for this to happen, would you say?
Oh, it has been. I'm thrilled. I think there's a need for these kinds of conversations, and so I love that we get to be able to have them here.
Same. So basically, Joe and I have met through a place called the Liner One, which is a company I work for, and I am the social community manager of the Liner One, and I take care of the day-to-day needs of social media, client contact, and so much more. And we were so lucky to be able to send our product to Joe, and it kind of just turned into this lovely relationship that we've been able to kind of cultivate and really just realize there was no conversation that was had between someone abled and someone disabled. And I asked Joe if she was willing to try to talk about it, and she said, yeah, I think so. I think that's what
Absolutely.
needs. And so
yeah, I think that there really is a big I feel like there's a lot of hesitation to ask questions coming from able-bodied people to disabled people, because it's like you don't want to say the wrong thing, but also we're never going to get past like stereotypes or stigmas or anything if we don't do that. So I think I'm so for this kind of environment and chat.
I love it. And so if you want to just like tell a little bit about your story before kind of like getting into everything, I think that would be like a great kind of preface of like who you are.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I go by Footless Joe, but my name is actually Jordan, a little known fact. And I live in Colorado Springs, and about almost 3 years ago now, I had to make the decision to have a leg amputation because I had years and years and years of pain and surgeries and difficulties being able to walk, and just got to the point where it didn't make sense to keep my leg anymore. So we got rid of it, and I kind of started down this new path of life as an amputee, and it definitely wasn't smooth. I had to have a couple other surgeries after that. And as I was adjusting to life as an amputee, it was really interesting because I was doing that as an adult. And so I had the experience of life being seen, at least as able-bodied, for the first 27 years of my life, and now being seen as something different, even though I didn't feel like I was different as a person. And so it's been interesting to kind of navigate that and be like, okay, so what did I used to think about disabled people that was wrong, and how can I fix that in my own brain? How can I maybe help spread awareness or address those questions? And so when I had to go through my amputation, I started making videos about the whole process, and that really grew into something I never expected, where my full-time job is now this. I work on social media and do a lot of advocacy work, and now just have these conversations. I think it's really important to raise awareness and to decrease that stereotype.
Would you say that this has obviously changed your life, but also like social media in a sense, and being able to share your story has been like one of the best things that probably could have happened to you in like this weird way? Or is that like too much to say?
No, I've actually wondered about that before, because if all of this hadn't happened, like if I hadn't lost my leg and all of that, there's no way that I would have the presence or the audience that I have the honor of having now.
Right.
And so it's just been a huge gift throughout this process, something that was very, very unexpected. I think this whole journey would have looked different had I not had a large community behind me, and I did it kind of all in the public eye, which was interesting. And so it really is a gift and something that was unexpected.
And I guess like one of the bigger things that I don't even think I've ever even asked you ever when we've been talking, so this is like super raw, but do you ever wish that it didn't happen, or do you think that's a bad way to think about it, or is that something you've ever like has it ever crossed your mind?
No, of course. Yeah, no, it definitely has. And I think that's one of those questions that like, I feel like the politically correct answer is like, no, it's turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I wouldn't change anything. But like, if I could go back in time and have a perfectly good working leg, yes, please, I would love that. However, like those aren't the cards that we've been dealt. And so we get to make the best of what we have. Right. And so I think it's something that you can't help but think about. So I do miss having a leg that I didn't have to assemble in the morning, but life is what it looks like now. And I have so many cool things and opportunities because of it. And it's just, you make the best out of what you have. And I'm grateful for it.
You're so positive about it too. And I mean, that's something that we'll get into like a little bit down the line in a couple different conversations, but you always say that, it's just kind of the way it is. Like, I'm a human. This is what I do. This is who I am. And it's not going to define me. And I think that's a great way to think about it. But did you always feel like that? Like when you first became an amputee, what was your mindset? Like, did you load everything, or were you like, let's get it off the bat, like let's get going?
So I got to make the decision, right? So I knew the time and place and the date and the location of like when this was going to happen, which is a very different way of going through an amputation.
So weird, like
wakes up from a
different,
challenging in different ways,
get,
right?
Like it's just a time and a place, and you're like, this is where I'm going to go. That's so.
This is where I'm leaving my leg.
Like crazy what? To even think about. And just like you said, like for 27 years you had both your legs and nothing even like crossed your mind that it was like that. Okay, so sorry, so go ahead. And so you're going into this like new journey apparently, in a sense, and you have to just be like, here I go. Here it goes.
And that is very much the mindset I had going into it, but there's no way to estimate the impact that it actually did have on me. Like people could have told me like, it's harder than you think. I would have been like, okay, cool. I'm going to do it anyways, because it's what I need to do. But it really was a lot harder. But I think everything prior to that moment in my life really did a good job of preparing me for like, sometimes life falls apart. Sometimes life falls apart. Happen, or things take an abrupt left turn when you were not expecting them to. And I think the only thing that I can say, because I've had a lot of really great moments and honestly a lot of really dark moments where I was like, this sucks, this absolutely sucks, everything's different, I'm tired all the time, trying to adjust. Like that first, I would say 2 years honestly was hard because you're trying to find a new normal. But at the end of the day, like even if things were good or bad, the only thing I did know is that like I was going to find a way to make it work. I was going to find a way through it, even if it meant that moment was really hard. And that's kind of what I try to advocate for, because I feel like there's so much out there that's like, be happy all the time, which we'll talk about more later. But sometimes it is really hard. So I think the mindset that I've come back to is just that I'll find a way to persevere and get through it one way or another.
And that's amazing. First off, that's great. I mean, I feel like that's a hard, because if you don't already have that type of mindset going into it, it would be hard to adapt that along the way, kind of thing. So did you feel like there was anybody, I mean, I'm sure there were so many people in your corner, but were you ever like annoyed at some point with people and you were just like, just shut up, like just let me kind of like just let me have my moment to like sulk for a second? Like did you ever feel like that was something that you dealt with, or were people not allowing you to like have those moments, or like what was that kind of process like? Because you got to kind of just like go through shit, and you got to go through the bottom to get to the top. And so what was your experience kind of with that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I very much felt that. When my story first started going out to sort of the world, there was a moment in time where a YouTube video really took off, and then news stations got interested, and then it just like, it went everywhere all of a sudden. I was like, oh, okay, people know who I am now. Hey, everybody. Hi, Fox News. Like, okay, cool. And it was all under the label of like, what an inspiring, incredible story of perseverance and overcoming. But this was like 4 months after my amputation. So grief is funny. It hits at weird places and weird times. And I would say I really had it was about a year after my amputation that I started being like, this is really hard, right? Because you're kind of just in survival mode. So it takes a while to process some of the emotions. And so I think to a large extent, people who weren't close to me online, who didn't like know me personally, but just the general public, when I started expressing more of like, there were moments that were really hard. There were moments where I was, a tear was shed on camera talking about something. And there was almost this reaction of like, well, you should be okay. Like you shouldn't have a hard time. You should just, be happy and fine and get over it. And there was that attitude. And it was frustrating only because I knew I used to be that person, right? I used to be that person who was like, you get to choose your own, just choose happiness, just choose happiness all the time, right? And that's not how humans work. That's not good psychology, in my opinion, or in the opinion of psychology.
No, just so the opinion of psychology.
And so yes, I definitely had quite a few moments, and occasionally still do, where I'm like, you know what? Sometimes this is just really hard. And you can take a moment to say it's really hard, and then you're going to figure out how to move on after that,
Do you ever think about, so kind of switching gears into like able bodies? So I know I'm very fortunate, right, to have all my working limbs. I've never really had to experience something. So when people, maybe in that person who commented that was like, able body, were you just like, excuse yourself? Like, excuse yourself for talking about this? And do you ever feel like it's hard to not, I don't want to say give the haters what they want, but do you ever just like see that comment and just be like, yo, I want to ruin him, or just something of that caliber where you're like, go take a time out and like kind of call them out in real life? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you ever just feel like that? Because I know you really live your life online, but obviously you want to have those boundaries from like, all right, you know what? They're just probably a little weasel that's coming for me for no reason. And I don't want to get into it, but you kind of want to. Like, have you ever felt like that?
Oh yeah. I think there's a lot to be said about taking a moment or like typing out everything you've ever wanted to say in like a Word document.
It's like texting an ex and you're like, stop. Don't do it.
Honey, no.
No, honey, no. You read it tomorrow morning. You're like, are we sure I said that? And you're like, where's the delete button? There's like, no, because it's on the internet forever. Yeah, no retracting there. Like, it's on there forever. So that must be tough. Yeah. Like, and just of course, because they don't know you. And they never will, really. Everything you go through like day to day and stuff like that.
And I think the flip side of it though is what I've discovered through not hitting send when I'm like angry, right? Sometimes I'll just ignore something altogether. But I've often found that when I've engaged with people who have said very insensitive or mean or ignorant things, like engaged with them in a respectful way, being like, hey, okay, I see you said that. Yeah. It's confusing to me because blah, 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 or what you might not understand is blah, blah, blah. Right. 90% of the time, someone will come back and be like, oh, I'm really sorry. I kind of didn't realize you were a real person. I didn't mean what I said. Like, here's what's going on in my life. And it's really helped me have a lot of compassion for when I see horrible comments. Not that it doesn't hurt sometimes. No. Like, it absolutely does.
Words hurt.
But yeah, words hurt.
Words hurt.
But to be like, it's not, chances are this isn't actually about me. Like just a quick diversion. There was the most poignant example of this for me was I was talking, someone left a comment about how it was all in my head, about how I made up all my pain. And they like diagnosed me with some kind of illness where I like wanted to get rid of my leg and all of this. And I was like, this is just, okay. No, that's not the case, basically, and tried to talk to them. And through commenting back and forth, I found out that his mom had actually lost her life to the thing he was accusing me of having. Really? And so like, it was a hugely emotional topic for him. And I was like, dude, this has nothing to do with me. This has everything to do with some like serious hurt in your life. I'm sorry that happened to you. Maybe don't take down other people, but like. Right.
But it's like an outlet for what they think is right at the time, but it doesn't obviously 100%. Justify it. But you are a real person, which is funny because like, we've created this world just where we look at these, YouTubers and influencers, Instagrammers, whatever it may be. And we're like, oh, well, they're famous, so they don't have a heart. It's like, well, I do. I am a real person. And I think it's funny because like we've grown up in the world where like our favorite people that we would watch were always on TV, our favorite movies. We go to the Blockbuster, we get a great movie, and we didn't know them and we had no input in their life. And then you have this whole new generation where you're saying, I can see someone vlog their entire day and think I know them, but they cut out 30 to like 2 hours of footage where they're crying over losing someone, having a bad day, whatever it may be. And you don't see that raw stuff. You just see the stuff that you kind of think is good and want them to see. So then the outsider looking is like, well, they're perfect. They must have no issues. And it's like, that's just not true. But I think for you, like with your content that I've seen, it's real. It is real, it is raw, it is authentic. And I think people are attracted to that because you want to be as real as you can. But I think it's also hard because you're like, where do I draw a line? Like, where's my life from like, where's like social media kind of thing? So that must be tough. I'd love to even just talk about that because I think that's kind of an interesting little like tidbit.
That's a really good question too. I've thought a lot about that, especially in the last few months where this is what I do full time now, right? Like I was able to transition out of the job that I had. This works a lot better for my health and my body. I'm super grateful for it. But then there's almost this pressure that you put on yourself that you have to share everything. And that gets weird because then you don't really, when you're focused on like recording the moments that you're supposed to be enjoying all of the time, sometimes it's fantastic. It's great. Like it's great to have, videos or photos or whatever. Like that's amazing. But when you're like planning everything in your life around that, it does get exhausting. And it's like, it's detrimental to your mental health. And so drawn some lines pretty recently where I've taken up a whole new hobby and activity that I'm super excited about that I am not talking about online
I
at
love
all.
it.
That I won't,
Good.
yeah, not a single picture,
Have your own
nothing,
stuff.
for now.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
now, exactly.
exactly.
Because it's kind of like a new
Yeah.
relationship. You're like, I cannot flaunt anything about anything because I
Yes.
want it to be just for me. But that's great. I mean, I feel
It's
like
exactly that. Yeah.
it's like, but I feel like in that world of social media where you have to kind of, I don't want to say be one-upping like the next best, but you're like, I don't want to be below that. I don't want to be forgotten. I don't want to be like looked over, passed over, whatever. So you're like, maybe just this one time I'll talk about this hobby.
Yes.
And then the hobby gets into be everything. And then you stop posting about it. Where's the hobby? What are you doing? And then you're like, hey, I'm just trying to live. Like, don't worry about my hobby, you know? So that must be just another like world. And I know that it's so interesting for you because the way that you live your life is just the way you live your life. But for a lot of people, like, would you say you have an even amount of able to disabled community members, or or do you feel like you're constantly talking to like one demographic over another? Like, do you know of that?
Yeah, I do actually, because I wondered about that a lot. Because there's often the assumption made that like when I'm talking about amputee stuff, it's mostly amputees listening, and that is not accurate at all.
Yeah. Okay.
I did a poll of my audience once just on YouTube asking, not even amputee specific, but like, are you a person with a disability or are you able-bodied? And it was like 25% people with disabilities and 75% able-bodied people.
Interesting.
And so that's kind of always the mark I've gone off of. And those aren't exact numbers, right? That's just kind of like a general poll.
Right.
But the majority of people that I speak to are able-bodied. And I think that that's, I love being able to do that. I love all of my community. I think it's great to be able to talk to people who don't have the same experience that you do. Right. Because I know I love being able to follow people online and learn from people like who are dealing with something I have no reference for. Like there's a gal who's been going through cancer and just beat it, and it's awesome. I have no idea what it's like for that. And like people who are non-binary or something that I'm not. I'm like, I want to know about your experience and your story because it's not mine. And like, I want to understand. I want to be
there. Right. And so that's how I feel about kind of coming to, so for me, I just joined this company about a year ago. I had no one in my family that was disabled. I don't have any friends that are disabled. So it was an interesting way to go about this new product, and I was like, what does it do? Who are we talking to? And I at points though, I felt a little foolish because I was like, am I being a phony working for a place that I can't relate to? And it kind of took me a little bit of time to I want to say get over the hump, but kind of like talk to different people in the disabled community. And they were like, you're just doing a job and you're trying and you're not being too aggressive. And I think there's like that fine line that, we sometimes like discuss, and I'm like, where is the fine line of like, what can I ask to not ask, and do you ever feel like you get bombarded with too many questions? Do you feel like you're responsible for something? And do you hate that feeling? Like, honestly, like, do you get tired of it? Like, and if you do, it's cool, because like, that's not all who you are. And it comes down to just treating you with decency and respect as a human being. But also I think how can I not ask? And like, if I know you like that, if I'm like, I'm talking to you. So I guess I just threw like 20 questions at you.
I like it. I can roll with it. Well, I think what you bring up about, kind of coming into the disabled community with no reference, I think that's awesome, right? Like it had to be disorienting and sort of a little like, what do I say? What do I say? Like, I just didn't want to be,
I didn't want to be mean. I didn't want to say anything wrong and then, look like a fool. And I think I care a lot about people's opinions, and I knew it was going to be a product that was going to help people, but I also knew that I had no knowledge about the community. And I fully would admit that when I'd be talking to someone, because I just wanted to be like super transparent, but at the same time, I didn't want to get judged for it. But I'm not saying anyone's judgy, but I think you come with like the pre-connotation. It's like, well, if this girl's working at a place like this, kind of like, why don't it's like kind of like you were going to be working at let's say like an engineering company, and you didn't go to school to be an engineer. They're like, what are you doing here?
You're like, I'm a phony.
You're like, no, for sure, I just snuck in. Don't worry about me. So I just kind of felt like, a little bit impostery, but at the same place, I wanted to not do it because I wanted to have a good heart and do it, but because I thought it was a cool thing to be able to like expand my horizons about, meet new people, hear different stories, worlds I've never been in, you know, situations I can never imagine, but still empathize with you, but not to the point where I was over compensating, being like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, cause I don't think it's like that. And what I've learned is
thank you for not doing that.
I don't want to be like that. Like, I'm like, you're cool. Like, if you're cool and you respect me and you're awesome, why would I not want to just like,
we're cool.
talk with you? Exactly. So it just was kind of like finding that line. And so like, yeah, I'll bring it back to you and like, kind of like what you think about kind of when people ask you about it and like, if it bothers you.
Yeah, I think because I've set up a lot of what I do and how I do it to be very open to questions, because I think they need to be asked, right? Because as a kid, I think most of us were taught like, don't stare at people who look different, don't ask questions, don't think of them. But all that does is cement in your little mind that like, oh, they're weird or different or scary, or I'm going to do something wrong.
Like you're bad
if I talk to them.
Yeah. It's like when your mom will be like, don't get in a random van with a stranger to get candy. It's like, will not go in stranger's van.
Yes.
And then you get told, do not look at a person. And you're like, okay, do not look at the person. Like, but you're so right. Cause that's just how you were, I don't say trained, but you were just like giving that, in your head, and you just get those thoughts. And then as you grow up, so it's like, when do you just break that thought process? When does it get shut down? Like, that's, I guess, what we're doing.
Yeah. And I honestly think it's a long process. I think that there's a lot of things that I think about disability and disabled people, even though I am one, that I'm like, oh, I'm still learning, like, oh, right, that's wrong. I thought that for, now 30 years.
Yeah.
But kind of coming back to your question of if I get tired of the questions and the curiosity, because I've set up what I do in a way that's open to that. A lot of the times, no. I think the only time I ever get frustrated is when people like demand my story.
Yeah.
When I'm like posting about something, like, and I don't have like my entire story of how I lost my leg in the comment section as well. I don't mind if someone's like, hey, I don't know, like what happened. But there are people who be like, you didn't explain how you lost your leg. And I can't even think of a comment right now, but that's like, it's basically like you owe me your story. And I'm like, well, I never owe anyone my story. Well, I'm happy to tell it if you ask for something.
I don't owe you anything, my guy. Exactly. I don't owe you one thing. And I feel like that is something that's super important to just, as you said, as you're saying it, you don't owe anybody anything about anything unless you are willing to do it and ask in a respectful way. And I think that's why we wanted to kind of do this, because we both have respect for each other. We haven't even met in real life, but like, I think you're amazing, like not yet. I'm coming to Colorado soon, I promise. But this travel, I gotta get out there. But it was important that, I wanted to do something, you wanted to do something. It's one of those things where I was like, does this even exist? And you were like, I don't even think so. So it's nice to just kind of have someone to talk about it with. And it takes, I feel like, not that I'm saying I'm a reasonable person, but I feel like two like-minded people that are just trying to better themselves and better other people when I'm around my friends. Because even when I started working for the Liner One, they were like, what does this company do? I'm like, well, let me tell you. This is what they do, and I'm not all that familiar with it, but I learned as I go, and they'll ask questions, and I'm happy that I can kind of learn from you. And then when I hear them being like, oh my God, that's so inspirational, I'm like, they're just getting a coffee downstairs, like don't worry about like what they're doing kind of thing, or like what he, she, they, whatever is doing. So it's just one of those things. So I feel like we covered a lot on this kind of like first rodeo here.
We did.
I'm happy about it though. We tackled a lot. So this podcast is going to be going up in June. I want to say the first week of June. We're recording it. I'm going to be honest. We're recording it in May, right? We're being proactive here. But
thinking ahead, guys.
Thinking ahead. And so when this podcast comes out, we're going to be putting it in the description of where you can go to ask Footless Joe your questions. Either it's going to be on our TikTok or on one of our Instagram posts, because at the end of June, we're actually going to have a live Q&A on the Liner One. Her and I will be kind of like giving a little recap of our time here, of what we've done, what we've said. So we'd love for you to give any questions you may have, big, small, medium, tall, whatever you're feeling. Yeah, because I think it's important,
and as long as it's asked respectfully.
As long as it's asked respectfully, we don't owe you anything. No, we owe them answers.
We do owe them the live.
We owe them like a little bit. We're like, we won't give you anything but like maybe a live, but whatever. It's totally fine. I like go back on my word. No. I would never do it. I'm honest. I'm an honest gal. Well, thank you, Joe. I'm happy that we got to sit down and talk about all that we did in this first lovely episode. And episode 2 will be coming out next week, where we're going to be discussing dating. So that should be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting and
That'll be
exciting.
awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you on episode 2.
We'll see you then.
Bye.